Simmons, and I represent the Center for the Advancement of Transformative Education, or CATE. And before we get started, I'd like to know who's in the room this morning. And so I'll pause for a moment to give everyone time to check in.
All right, you should see the poll on your screen now, and you can choose from administrator, district administrator, teacher, or other. We've got about 67% of the audience has voted. Let's wait till that gets up over 80 before I close the poll. And again, we're just trying to get a pulse for who's in the room.
All right, good. We have a good mixture of everyone. We have 50% who are administrators. We have about 18% district administrators, central office workers, and then we have about 18% teachers, and we even have others. So someone who's in the education field. All right, that's great. All right, so student disengagement has become a topic of interest among schools and education communities. Every day, teachers must be creative enough to gain their students' attention. We want to hook them into a lesson and keep their attention for an entire learning block. Depending on what students are doing, their interest in the lesson is short-lived. The idea behind project-based learning is to engage students in their learning by encouraging them to investigate their passions and create projects that result in meaningful learning experiences. Harnessing students' passion to solve local versions of global issues that define our quality of life may be one of the best ways we have to fully engage students in their own learning. So that brings us to our outcomes for our time together. By the end of our time together, you will have an understanding of why project-based learning can increase student engagement. You will have reflected upon current instructional practices to determine if students encompass the 21st century learning outcomes to ensure they are college and career ready, and you will learn the process of building a project-based learning environment. So our education system was developed during the Industrial Revolution, when there was a need for standardization with the production line mentality. There is a need for our education system to evolve to reflect the times of the 21st century rather than the Industrial Revolution. Skills such as problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, and presenting ideas are essential to today's society due to the many careers that are now available that were not in our society during the last century. According to Trilling and Fidel, our education system is based on society's needs at the turn of the 19th century. This includes the length of the day, subjects taught, and methods of teaching. During the Industrial Revolution, there was a need for factory workers and laborers. The education system reflected this: mass production of students being taught the same way, with little to no room for individuality and creativity. In modern society, there has been a shift from learning facts to being able to think critically, as facts are now readily available to everyone. Learning to think is a skill lauded by 21st century employers. Students who actively think about what is being learned are engaged in their learning. Education exists in the larger context of society. When society changes, so too must education if it is to remain viable. And according to the National Association of Colleges and Employers in 2002, these were the top 5 new hire skills that employers were looking for in college graduates as they transition into the workplace. And on the 5-point scale, 1 being the least important and 5 being the most important, you can see that all 5 skills here are very close to being a 5. Employers value a 4-year college degree, many of them more than ever. Over 700 business leaders were surveyed in 2013 by the Chronicle. Half of the respondents reported that many job applicants were technically proficient, lacked the communication, decision-making, and problem-solving skills necessary to do jobs they applied for. Far too many college graduates touted high grades and test scores, but they lack the key skills to be successful in the workplace. And as of today, the National Association of Colleges and Employers has now identified 8 competencies associated with career readiness: critical thinking and problem solving, oral and written communication, teamwork and collaboration, digital technology, leadership, professionalism and work ethic, career management, and global and intercultural fluency. So think of it like this: lectures and direct instruction can be used to convey information to students, but they don't enhance skills like teamwork, problem solving, and curiosity that employers are increasingly looking for. So there are many fallacies in education that challenge traditional assumptions about grade levels, teachers, students, and administrators in pursuit of higher student achievement and academic excellence. I'm going to cover 5 educational fallacies for you today. So the first one is chronological age does not equal cognitive development level. I can remember when my youngest daughter started pre-K in a private homeschool, where she was taught all of the early learning fundamentals such as reading, writing, and basic math concepts. She has 2 older siblings. I have a daughter and a son that are older, in which she learned a lot from them just through basic interaction. So by the time she was, ready for kindergarten, she was 3. But I opted to register her at the age of 4, just before her 5th birthday, which came September 30th. And because she wouldn't be 5 until then, in that September cutoff date, she would have been 5 after that, they wouldn't enroll her. And so that whole idea of you have to be a certain age and it equals up to your cognitive development is a true fallacy. The next one is relative age equals developmental age. Many studies have shown that girls mature faster than boys. And sometimes children, boys and girls, mature faster than their own peers. I remember recently reading about several children starting college at the beginning of this school year between the ages of 11 and 15. So that clearly is a fallacy. So you're seeing more and more children becoming entrepreneurs and business savvy, even at those ages, 11, 12, 14, creating their own lanes and making money. So in this era, we shouldn't make the assumption that a kid's or a child's relative age is equal to their developmental age. Common assessment. This fallacy is evidenced in the penchant among modern educators who believe that learning of students can be adequately quantified through tests. Educators have always believed that students should be assessed and some kind of measurement is necessary in order for parents to know whether children are progressing. And I agree with that. But the idea that knowledge or understanding could be fully captured in a number is a very recent historical vintage. The next one is, the fourth fallacy is educational quality. The fourth one is ranking student test performance determines the value of the program. So educational quality can't be measured by standardized tests alone. There are many circumstances that surround different schools. For example, students in China or Japan attend school more than 8 hours within a day and weekends, whereas in America, most school days are 6 hours. But even still, the program that is offered within a setting that is 8 to 10 hours in a day is not necessarily better than a program that offers 6 hours of learning. Also, I wonder, when looking at this data like this, how well do these programs prepare students for the workplace? It's not just a matter of literacy skills. Knowing how to think is equally as important. So the fifth fallacy is kids will remember the content because I told them to remember. Caught up in that rat race to complete the curriculum and not questioning whether the rush will have a long-term recall, or whether long-term recall is even necessary in the world of Google. I admit I'm guilty of this fallacy. I can remember teaching geometry in middle school to prepare my students to take the ISAT. And I would disseminate so much information within each class period, hoping that they would, intake it and remember it all, just so that they can take this particular test. And I would disseminate so much information with each class period as a result of that. It was like rolling dice and taking a chance on them remembering everything I had taught them. So that leads me to believe that teacher input does not necessarily equal pupil output. This fallacy is part of the process product tradition. After hearing those 5 fallacies, I'm sure you could think of many more. So now looking at this particular slide, I want you to think about the following. How can teachers create purpose-based learning that will engage students? And have we as educators ever stopped to ask students any of these particular questions? And how can we extend learning experiences beyond school that would allow students to answer these questions for themselves? Well, I personally believe that authentic project-based learning is indeed the answer. So then what is project-based learning when you think about it? The roots of project-based learning, or PBL, extend back over 100 years to the work of educator and philosopher John Dewey, whose laboratory school at the University of Chicago was based on the process of inquiry. Dewey argued that students will develop personal investment in the material if they engage in real, meaningful tasks and problems that emulate what experts do in real-world situations. In the last 2 decades, learning sciences researchers have refined and elaborated Dewey's original insight that active inquiry results in deeper understanding. Student engagement is essential to the learning environment. Research supports the theory that if we can engage students, then we can influence their achievement. Project-based learning environments have 5 key features. PBL starts off with a driving question or maybe even a problem to solve. Students then explore the driving question by participating in authentic inquiry. As they explore, they learn and apply important ideas in the discipline of study. Students, teachers, and community members engage in collaborative activities to find solutions to the driving question, which mirrors the complex social situation of expert problem solving. While engaged in the inquiry process, students are scaffolded with learning technologies that help them participate in activities normally beyond their ability. Students then create a set of tangible products that address the driving question. These are shared artifacts, publicly accessible, external representation of the class's learning. Sometimes key features are revisited based upon the idea that the tangible products may not fully address or answer that driving question. It sort of kind of takes on the process of design thinking, as you can see here in this slide. So now that we have a familiarity of what project-based learning is, let's contrast projects and project-based learning. Classroom projects are typically teacher-directed, highly structured. There's no fluidity, like there is no, going in and out and coming back and revisiting. It's usually summative or there's a culmination. You can never go back. And it provides a simple answer and primarily is centered in school. Whereas PBL is inquiry-based, investigative, open-ended, and it allows for feedback, which makes it ongoing. Students are able to go back and make changes or make it better, and students are engaged in potentially solving real-world problems. And thinking about this transformation of instructional practice, I can't help but to correlate this transition to Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. Simon Sinek compares 3 circles of the Golden Circle to the human brain. The what, or the outer circle, is compared to the neocortex. Here's where we find rational thought and language. The how and why circles are compared to the limbic brains. The limbic brains are responsible for feelings like trust and loyalty for all human behavior and decision making. However, they do not have a capacity for language. This is why influential companies and organizations like teaching institutions should start from the core question rather than the what question. They target the decision-making part of the brain, and they know that their potential customers will then rationalize their decisions. But before these potential customers do this, the influential companies have already more or less reeled in their customers because they have established a connection. They have created a match between the actual reason and the underlying decision. When companies target the neocortex or the what question first, they are appealing to their potential customers' rational approach. It goes without saying that these potential customers are capable of analyzing the message, but that does not drive their behavior and produce results. It is much harder to work towards emotions if you start from the what ratio. We naturally communicate from the outside in. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. And every organization on the planet knows what they do. Like as teachers, we know what we do. Even as individuals, we know what we do. We often lead off with that what we do. These are products we sell or services we offer, like teaching. Most of us know how and are able to tell how we're different or we're special. These are things that set us apart from the competition or everyone else. So from telling how, we then expect behavior like a purchase or a vote or even support. But the problem is that what and how do not inspire action. So facts and figures make rational sense, but we don't make decisions purely based just on facts and figures. Focus on your purpose by starting with the why. Very few organizations know why they do what they do. For example, your why is not about making money. That's a result. It's a purpose or a cause or a belief. It's the very reason why your organization exists or even why you teach. Looking at this with an instructional lens, if your students meet or exceed target scores on a standardized test, that is then the result. What then is the purpose or your why? What's your cause or what's your belief in even taking that standardized test? So now I want you to briefly look at this video. And I want you to take a look at what it looks like when you know your why.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm going to show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor. Can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director?
Yes, sir.
All right, so Let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you get the first part of that? Go ahead. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. That's what I can sing. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, let's give it a version. Let's get, your uncle just got out of jail. You got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick. You know the version I'm talking about. To see if that exists. Let me see what you got. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. When I'm found was blind, but now I see. Okay. He's almost because. First time I actually sing, he knew what he was doing. Second time, he knew why. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video, but essentially, you should allow your why or your purpose to center around these valuable life skills that students will use outside the classroom as they progress through school, preparing for college and career readiness. So before I talk about building a PBL experience, a project-based learning experience, I want you to imagine that you've been given an opportunity to visit and observe two standards-based classrooms teaching the same scientific concept. Take about 1 to 2 minutes to read what takes place in both classrooms. And as you read, I want you to think about which classroom is most indicative to the classrooms in your school or school district. Does your classroom or classrooms in your district look and or sound like the first classroom or the second? And then think, how would the students describe their own classroom experiences? Would they say that their class is most like classroom 1 or most like classroom 2? Begin reading now. So to sum this up, we really want to get the students to be more engaged in classroom number 2, in a setting like classroom number 2, where students are actually doing things and learning things hands-on and figuring out how to answer that driving question at the top. Project-based learning is an overall approach to the design of learning environments or learning experiences. It's mostly about essential or what's absolutely necessary versus the important. Teachers should comb through their intended materials and toss out the non-essentials. They should be prepared to justify what they're keeping and what it is that they're tossing. If we're preparing students to work and figure things out on their own, we should ponder about why our students should care about the specific content that is being taught. It really should be relevant, and be prepared to justify that value that is extended by teaching this content. In a traditional setting, we only ask students to demonstrate what they know, giving students the skills and resources to act and think differently, and then demonstrate this is what PBL is all about. They should start off with foundational knowledge. What do I know? And then move to humanistic knowledge. How do I act differently because I know? And then reach meta-knowledge, or that thinking about their thinking stage with how do I think differently because I know? A project-based learning environment consists of students working in teams to experience and explore relevant real-world problems, questions, issues, and challenges, then creating presentations and products to share what they have learned. A teacher's role is one of coach, facilitator, guide, advisor, or even a mentor, yet he or she is not directing and managing all the student work. After building a PBL experience, students will no longer be just doing projects. Teachers will now be guiding students starting with the driving question, and the students will lead themselves through the inquiry process by devising their own plans to solve a problem. Afterwards, testing their solution and maybe doubling back to revise their original plan. And then after that, applying their knowledge and skills to solve the real problem. They're ready to begin to answer more questions. To reinforce the shift that takes place when the teacher begins to facilitate the PBL process, we're going to examine this Rigor Relevance framework, looking at the roles of the teacher and the student. If students are to have a successful PBL experience, the teacher must ensure that there is high relevance as well as high quality rigor within the driving question that ultimately lends itself for student ownership of the PBL process. So if you look at step 1 of this framework, the teacher's role, in the PBL environment that reflects high rigor and high relevance, the teacher's role is to create a driving question and then serve as a guide of instruction in which learners find meaningful and important. It should also encompass worthwhile content that is not only meaningful, but is also anchored in a real-world situation. After the teacher presents the driving question, students begin to research information that could potentially help them to answer the driving question or to even solve the problem that was presented. So notice that this phase of the PBL process is of low rigor and low relevance. They're strictly doing research and trying to find out or figure out information. This is, in this day alone, reminds me of traditional projects where students do the research. I must admit, I was also guilty of this as a teacher. I would assign a project where students would simply seek information to just simply answer a question and then be done, or maybe put it up on a poster board and then be done. In step 3, students then take the information they've acquired and test the relevancy of it as it relates to the driving question or problem. So remember this diagram? Now, as I said back in this slide, where the students are now taking the information and finding its relevance, the students here are moving from foundational knowledge, from the what do I know, to now the humanistic knowledge. How do I act differently because I know? In step 4, the students now reflect on the potential use of the new knowledge. It may be a solution or it may not be a solution. In this stage, C is of high rigor but low relevance. And finally, in step 5, you'll see students applying the information they've learned to answer the question, the driving question, or to solve the problem. Application of knowledge is key to high quality rigor and high relevance. And then once again, I must reiterate that this process is student-centered, where the students can complete the heavy lifting of the task involved. So if you ever become interested in piloting the PBL process within your school or district, this is an overview of how a teacher can begin to map out their own projects based on the unit in which they're presenting. Don't worry about getting this process right the first time around. You have to know that this process is evolving, and you have to make it fit according to your students and your environment. What you see here is a sample of a template in which teachers could use as they flesh out their projects. Teachers should be able to plan as a team. They should have time as a PLC to plan what it is that they're going to, present as a project to students. And also a PLC serves as a good resource to provide feedback as they develop their experience for their students. So, both documents actually are able for you all to download if you're interested in trying to start this process within your school, classrooms, or school districts. So to sum up our time together, I want to show you an example of project-based learning in action within the 3rd grade. This is called the Tiny House Project. The driving question is, how can we as a design team design a house for clients considering budget, location, and personal preference?
For this project, you are going to design a home, you're going to plan a home, you're going to build a home. This project, the Tiny House Project, is where students are designing tiny houses. Remember, when you're going to build this, we have to think about who's living in the house. There was a boom in tiny homes, just the idea of living in one, just because in the city, the population is growing and there's more people, less room, and maybe a tiny house is more cost efficient, more green. Would you like to have your own room? Would you like to have your own space? The driving question was, how can we, as a design team, design a house for clients, taking into consideration budget and location and personal preferences? The entry event was Minecraft. So they used Minecraft to build just a house that they would build for their family.
This is inside the house. This is where the sofa, and over here is where I sleep.
They're able to use their creativity. They're able to just be free and just to build without anybody giving them parameters. Back to our project and this driving question. What do we need to know to answer this question?
Like, say they have family that's going to come with us. They have to fix it. Have a guest room.
The Minecraft building starts like, how many rooms do we build? And so they came up with their need to know. Any other need to know you'd like to add? Well, we have to know like how many kids there are, or how big the family is, and what are those questions that you think you could ask the client, and they're like, yeah. And so we come back to the driving question. We came back to the need to knows, and we came back to their entry event just so that they can get some questions that are appropriate for the project to their clients.
What is the minimum square footage you want? 400. You want is second story?
Yes, second story would be good. Okay, yeah, that'd be cool.
I think it's important for them to know that there's a real client because it gives the project more authenticity.
Would you like to have a garden outside your house?
Yes. When they form a relationship with the client, then they start to care about what the client thinks.
This is the final product. This is what the construction documents look like. But not too different from that concept drawing, right? We have the bedrooms up here, master bedroom in the corner.
So I asked an expert to come and present to the students, and he was actually a structural engineer.
You're gonna see elevations. You just kind of look at what kind of information is on there. How do you tell a wall is a wall? So you put two lines parallel to one another.
And we talked about making blueprints and what does that look like. We're having a layout.
Look, it even has plants in it.
These are called elevations.
I think they were really excited about seeing the blueprints because it was just real things that they can hold, they can touch, and they can see, and they know that engineers touched it and any engineers made this, and this is what we're going to do.
All right, we're gonna move into our next rotation. On this side, we have front row and RAS kids for listening to reading and answering comprehension questions.
So as we plan the project, we think about the standards that we're going to be using. In this project, we're using opinion writing or reading of informational text, and we integrate that into like a daily rotation of in English language arts. So this is an article from NASA, and it's called Tiny House Fun. If you have something you want to highlight, like you want to get back to, or a word that you really don't understand and you want to learn more about that, you can highlight some words. So on that day, I had a group and we were looking at informational reading. And then another group, they were listening to a book that had to do with houses. And then another group was working on vocabulary, and all the vocabulary is part of the project. And then another group was just doing their read to self, and that's just books that they're interested in, so they're practicing reading independently.
Write your name at the top.
For math rotations, we call it math with the teacher, math with technology, and math with a partner.
House size that your client wanted.
And then I'm working with the group, and we're really looking at area and perimeter and the difference between area and perimeter. Okay, so can you tell me what the square units are here? Another activity that we did with math was the Cheez-Its math. When they looked at the square footage, we said that each Cheez-Its was 1 square inch, and they used that kind of information to do square footage within the house. It was just kind of a connection for them. To help them refine their designs of their homes, students went through a feedback protocol.
I turned the bathtub from here to here because I know that you can't get through the toilet. There's a bathroom with the shower.
They were paired up with another group, and they presented their models, they presented their blueprints and their layout, and they talked about what was in the house and who their client was, just to get some feedback from their peers.
Our client is Miss Pena. Her age is 39. Her budget is $40,000.
Within the fishbowl protocol, what we did was, me and another teacher, we sat in front of a presenting group, and everyone else looked around us, just like a fishbowl where they're not to talk, they're not to say anything, they're just really listening and seeing the interaction between the presenter and the guest.
I like how you do go into the living room, but maybe push the bedroom in the back, and then so then that way she has more privacy.
It's the purpose of looking at that interaction between the audience and the presenter is so you can think about questions, you can think about behavior within the meeting, and so they can use that as a model for when they go back to their groups.
This is the laundry area, and then here's the pantry to store all the clothes. Right here we have a little office.
We practice different ways to present to their clients. We talk about eye contact, we talk about confidence, we talk about postures, we talk about volume of your voice.
Hello, my name is America. Hello, my name is Christopher. And the title of our project is Tiny House Fun. Our driving question of this project is, given a budget, how can we as a design team plan and plan for a family?
The last day, of this journey is for them to really present their work to their clients. And they were so excited.
Do you have a hard time building a house?
Kind of, yeah. We had to redo some of the walls so that air goes back in. There's the master bedroom. The middle is the kitchen. There's a room.
They shared their blueprints, they shared their layout, they shared their budget, and they shared their opinion paragraphs that they wrote so that they could try to persuade their client to purchase their home.
So, within this particular video, I just want to recap a couple of things. There were multiple things happening within this particular video. And first of all, I have to say, third grade, within the third grade, or even just in the elementary grades, a lot of people find that PBL is hard to incorporate, which is why I chose this video for you all to see. Because third grade, as it does in high school, it takes a whole lot of planning. But there were certain things that were happening amongst the students with the teacher guiding and facilitating. Notice she still had her stations. She was still able to have students to do things on their own. She was still able to work at her kidney bean table with a group of students focusing on particular skills, doing mini lessons, while other students were off doing either reading on their own, math on their own. And notice that it was centered, most of it was centered around this unit of building a tiny house. And so she essentially created the unit. And I'm imagining that she created that unit with a fellow teacher. But I wanted to identify the key things that happened, those 21st century learning outcomes. You saw students collaborating, you saw students creating, you saw them problem solving, you saw them working as a team, and she also made note that she taught them how to communicate, give eye contact. They also had to do writing. All of those things were incorporated in just this unit within the third grade. And so it can happen. I want you to understand that PBL can happen in the early grades as well as in high school. High school and middle school, you have teachers that teach, one or maybe two subjects. They can, plan out their PBL experience with those one or two subjects focusing on a different topic or a unit. But in elementary, it can be done as well, and it can be done within that classroom setting. Also notice that she involved the community. She had people to actually come in, people that are doing actual jobs to come in or have specific careers to come in and talk with these students about what it is that they do and then employ them to use those same skills in solving a problem. So I just wanted to show you all what PBL looks like, and you also got a chance to see early on what a PBL experience looks like within a high school science class or within a middle school science class. But as I said before, you can create this process. I'm going to go back a couple of slides. You can create this process by having teachers come together to answer these questions and even filling out this template. And I do want to say this again, that you may not get it right the first time. And know that project-based learning is evolving. And it evolves around your environment, a teacher's environment, your school's environment, your district's environment, and around your students. So this is a process that can be done over and over and over again, practicing it until you get it right. But now I know I'm a little bit early, but I do want to, as Arlen said, open it up for questions. I thank you all so much for participating, but I do want to give an opportunity for you all to ask questions that you may have about the PBL experience. I also want to say that there are many facets to project-based learning. There's problem-based learning, there's community-based learning involving projects. And whatever road that you take, in order for PBL to be successful, you have to allow for teachers to have professional development. I guess, to keep practicing this process as it evolves. And then you can find out, if there are certain teachers who stand out more than others, and they can then facilitate this process. But also know that I am also available, and my information is up on the screen. And then now I'm going to turn it back over to Arlen.
Yes, thank you so much, Kendra. I'm sorry, last thought there?
No, I was just saying I'm turning it back over to you so that you can facilitate those questions if they have any.
You bet. We've got a question here from Eric. And again, thanks, Kendra, for sharing your wonderful information with all of us, and appreciate the participation thus far from the audience. This question comes from Eric. Obviously, PBL can take as long or as short as you would like, but is there a general ballpark timeline?
When you say timeline, are you mean just the entire process of PBL, or are you talking about the planning process? Are you talking about the whole process in general? Like, I need to know what specific part are you talking about?
He's talking about the number of lessons, he says.
Okay, so usually PBL focuses around a unit. So, for example, if you're studying like the Civil War, right, you may want to create a driving question that is relevant to today. So that process can be like, if it takes you about, I don't know, 3 to 4 weeks to study a unit on the Civil War, you can have that driving question at the beginning of that unit, have the students kind of thinking about it as they're learning about the Civil War, and then maybe start, have them working on that. So it can be 4 weeks, it can be 6 weeks, it actually can be as long as you want. It just depends on where your students are and what level they're working at.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Follow-up question from Eric. Do you ever differentiate projects based on your students?
You know what? You can differentiate, but I would not encourage that. I say that because I did an actual pilot within a group of students after school, and we did actually community project-based learning based on their community. So the students were all in, mixed levels. There were high performing students, there were low performing students, and what I and a couple of my colleagues did is we meshed those students together, and they kind of fed off of each other. And I know a huge question a lot of teachers had asked me, even with the teacher that I was working with, that I was coaching in this whole process, had asked, how do we hold students accountable? That is where you come in, you step in, and you provide questions and you provide feedback on a daily basis. And maybe you want to, sit down and talk about, have the students to decide who's going to facilitate or take on which role within that whole process. So it is something where you have to know your students really well and know what they're able to do and what they're able not to do. But I wouldn't encourage you to separate them. I feel like the experience, they will get something from that experience. They will learn from their peers, but you have to make sure that they're all able to do something. Whatever that project is, make sure that all students are able to take part of that project. Think about that whole, the third grade video I just showed you, where 2 students were standing up to present. One student may have been able to present better, but they were both standing together, and each one of them had a responsibility and a role within that project.
Kendra, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, great. Very good. Well, we don't have any other questions coming into the question spot at this time. I did post to chat, if everyone could open up the chat panel. I posted the link to the evaluation for this webinar, and if you're from Illinois, you'll get the ISB Evidence of Completion form after completing this evaluation. So make sure to click that link in the chat pod. That's going to open up an evaluation form in your browser window. Fill that out to its entirety, and then you'll get the ISB Evidence of Completion form for 1 hour of PD credit. All right, well, Kendra, I don't see any other questions coming in at this time. So we're going to mute our microphones. We'll hang out here for a couple more minutes in case anything comes in. But here's something coming in from Lance here.
Okay.
What are some free resources to get started, Kendra?
A good resource will be pblworks.org. It used to have the title of the Buck Institute, but pblworks.org is a really good place to get resources. To scour that website will be really helpful. They actually have projects that you can do with your students in all grade levels. And I apologize, I did not put that up there, but pblworks.org. It used to be called the Buck Institute of Education, BIE, but they've recently changed their name.
Okay. Very good. Let me double check, make sure there aren't any new questions coming in here.
All right.
And just as a reminder, this webinar will be archived on edleadersnetwork.org under our live events section in the main navigation. So you'll be able to access this, and I'll be sending out a link to all participants as well. All right, looks like there are no more questions coming in. Kendra, thank you so much for your time and expertise. Appreciate everyone's willingness to jump on this webinar and participate this morning. You are free to close the GoToWebinar control panel, and that will log you out of the session. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of the school year.